You're in God's image, whether you're straight or gay or trans or black or white, or, we are all made in God's image.
Yeah.
That's the truth of Genesis chapter 1. And then after this has happened, of course, there's this great statement. And God saw all that he had made. All. Yeah. And it was very good. Original goodness.
Yes.
Not original sin.
Yes.
Original goodness.
That's right.
We're all made in God's image.
That's right. Yeah.
Now I know that people get them, so they say, what about Romans chapter 1, and what about 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and 1 Timothy chapter 1, and what about, and there's probably too much for us to talk about here because we've been going on for a long time already, but do the hermeneutical work.
Yeah.
Study these passages and discover what they were really saying, because a text without context, as you know as well as I, is always a pretext for whatever you want to believe.
You're looking good, man. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We're in person.
It's a miracle.
First time in North Carolina.
First time in North Carolina. Yeah.
About 45 minutes north of where I live.
Yeah. Well, the sun shines. Do you know that I'm Anglo-Indian? Yeah. So that means that if I'm in the sun, I just get browner and browner and browner. Right. So I don't go red. So
So you're good.
Yeah, I'm good. My colour has changed a lot since I've been here.
And you're here for a couple of things, but you were here today at a festival.
A festival which is called Wild Goose.
Yeah.
Which happens every year.
Yeah.
In North Carolina. Yeah. And there's a festival like it in the UK. And I think this was inspired by that. It's called Greenbelt, which is a Christian arts festival and theological debate, discussion. Yeah. You have issues around faith, and I sometimes go speak at that. Yeah. And then the American crew invited me out here, which was wonderful. Yeah. And then I'm going up afterwards. I'm speaking there again tomorrow. Then I'm going up to Philadelphia to Eastern University. Well, actually to a church in Philadelphia, and then to Eastern University, because that's where Tony Campolo, who sadly died last year. Not last year, but it was a really great mentor and friend to me. Is where he was a professor, and I'm working with the faculty to create a legacy for him in terms of the work that he did in America and in England, a kind of transatlantic thing. Yeah. He was a sociologist and theologian and a practitioner, and sociology and theology together are a fantastic combination, as well as, especially if you earth it in praxis the whole time. So that's what we're about.
And last time I had you on the podcast, you were doing something for his birthday, which I don't think he quite reached.
Yes, we were doing something for his 90th birthday, and he didn't quite get there. He died a few months short of that. He lived with a severe stroke that he had about 5 years back. Yeah, and but everyone was hoping he'd make 90. And actually, what I'm really pleased with is the team here at Eastern University. Tony, when you used to go see him, I used to go stay with him once a year since he had the stroke. And in the little room where he lived, he had two photographs on the wall when you came in. Yeah. And one photograph was of him and Einstein, because as a teenager, he won the opportunity to study under Einstein.
Seriously?
Yeah. As a young teenager.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was him and Albert stood there.
And him as a teen?
As a teenager. Wow. Yeah. And then the only other picture on that wall, photograph on that wall, was of him and Bono. So what happened was, I had discovered that in Bono's autobiography, he talks about the influence that Tony Campolo had on him, because Bono came through the church, in Ireland, and he'd really struggled with all these doctrines and things and lost his way. He just couldn't live with it. And then he heard Tony Campolo speaking, and it renewed his faith in terms of justice.
Right.
And then, his contribution to Band-Aid and all that kind of stuff. Bono in his book says it was Tony's teaching that inspired him. Yeah. So as we were putting together these films, little vox pops from people about what Tony had meant to them, I said to the team here at Eastern in Philadelphia, I said, I think I can get Bono.
Yeah.
I think I can get Bono. I don't know Bono, by the way.
Right. You didn't know Bono.
No, I didn't know Bono. So I said, I think I can get Bono. So I worked out a way, that 6 degrees of separation
right,
thing where you always
know
someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And actually I knew someone who I knew Bono.
Yeah.
So I rang him and talked to him, and then he said, let's put something together. And so I wrote this note for Bono and sent it off and all the rest of it. And then Bono's office got in touch, and they kind of anyway, the end of this story is fantastic.
Yeah.
So Bono recorded a video. I had to chase it a few times because he's busy. But Bono recorded a video thanking Tony for his 90th birthday.
Right.
Thanking Tony for the inspiration.
Yes.
In a way that only Bono could do.
Yes.
He's a lyricist, isn't he? And he's kind of like fantastic. But this video came through, and I knew that Tony wasn't well at all. So I got the video.
Right.
And I WhatsApped it.
Right.
To Bart, who's Tony's son.
Right.
And that was that. A few days later, Tony died. And I was talking with Bart on the phone after Tony's death.
Yeah.
And Bart said that gathered around Tony's bed, the family gathered around Tony's bed.
Right.
And they played Bono's message to him. And they think it may well have been the last thing that he could actually hear.
Wow.
Bono's thank you to him.
Wow.
For the inspiration he'd been.
Wow. I have to tell you, with the 6 degrees of separation, we have a mutual friend sitting in this room.
Yeah.
I may have seen that video.
Oh.
And I may have heard that story, but I wanted everyone else to hear it because I watched Bono. I finished Bible college, couldn't make the preacher or the pastor suit fit, so I started a band. And U2 was, of course, they formed my musical tastes. They were who I listened to in my formative years, so I'm a huge Bono fan. Yeah. And Martine and Tobero was over here, and a mutual friend of ours, and he may have, when I saw him, he may have shown that video.
It's a great video.
It was. I got emotional watching it. And I may have told a few people since that I have 6 degrees of separation from Bono now.
Yeah.
But I love that we started the conversation there, because I often refer to myself as a relational theologian, which is simply a practical theologian. My journey's been one in which 16 years ago, and I got saved when I was 5, but and grew up in the church, had amazing parents who demonstrated what it was to love well. But I had this separation message constantly coming from the pulpit. And about 16 years ago, 35 years of age, I had a huge shift. And I won't get into the details other than to say that it was in that moment where there was no shadow of turning in the nature of Father, Son, Holy Spirit anymore. And I got stubborn in that direction. And I got a Christological hermeneutic, if you will.
Yeah.
And I began to pursue a God who was good and only good as Jesus reveals. And at that point became very practical in my theology and very expansive in how I understood it. And of course, it trickled into all of the places where separation existed. And we have these conversations all the time, conversations about justice, conversations about our understanding of the afterlife, conversations about the inclusive nature of the love of God. But really, my heart is what's the best thought I can have about them today, knowing that tomorrow will be better than that, and knowing that tomorrow it'll be expansively better than that, and also knowing that my expansively good ideas or good thoughts about God are probably going to ruffle feathers, which I know you've experienced.
Yeah.
But maybe share a little bit of the actual practical aspect of, I know what you're doing right now. We were talking before we hit record about our understanding of who he is in light of what you do practically. Some of the nonprofits that you know, the kids that you work with, and the ability to see beyond behavior, to be able to see beyond some of the separation thinking that we were raised with.
Well, I think our theology, good theology, is always an interaction with humanity, isn't it?
Yeah.
With our experience. So we all journey on, and we all grow, and we all change.
Right.
And I think this thing which you're hinting at, that over time, that means hopefully that we become more generous and more inclusive as we go. And that's to do with aging, but it's to do with what we see in life and what we know in life. I mean, I would, you know, it's what you say reminds me of a story I was telling earlier today. Actually, it was one of the kind of foundational stories for me. So I'm a Baptist minister. I did theology at an evangelical college founded by Charles Spurgeon, who was a kind of great Victorian preacher, etc. And a very Calvinistic theology, all the rest of it. I left college. I worked for a church for 4 years, and then I left the church. I loved working for that church, but they helped me leave to set up what's become the Oasis charity that I wanted to found, that created education and created housing and created healthcare, etc., for people in churches, all sorts. Anyway, the thing was, as Oasis got set up, it grew in the UK to start with. We work in other countries now as well, but it grew in the UK, and it was this huge youth movement. Still is, but it was just a youth movement then. And we launched all sorts of projects, which, besides other things, besides giving young people an opportunity to get involved in leadership, raised lots of money. And the money we took and gave to justice groups working around the world.
Right.
And this extraordinary thing happened to me. We were giving money to a project in Thailand and in Bangkok. And what they ran was an orphanage. And it was fantastic work they did. And so, having given them lots of money and been behind them, they invited me out to see the work. So I went out to Bangkok. This is years and years and years ago. Oasis was young, and I saw what they were doing. It was fantastic, with these 30 children that they'd given a brand new start to and hope to. And then I was there for a few days, and then they said, but before you go, we have to take you to the place where the children come to us from. And I said, oh, you get them all from one place? And they said, yeah, all from one place, and you've got to come and see that, because then you will see the need. So we got in their Volkswagen camper van, which I remember was white and light blue, one of those old ones, and we drove out to the edge of Bangkok, and they said, this will shock you, and I thought, well, it won't, but yeah. And we went to this abandoned hospital. It was broken down. The doors were broken, the windows were broken, except that it was all overgrown outside. And they said, this is where we get all the children from. They said, in this hospital, there are another 500.
Wow.
They've all been abandoned in the streets because their parents didn't want them, thrown away. And we went into this hospital building. There were very few staff who all wore masks. We went onto wards. All the children had shaved heads. They weren't cared for. There were very few staff there anyway. And we looked down ward after ward, and they were lined with beds on both sides. And in each bed, there were at least 2 children,
Right.
and sometimes 3 children. And we walked into one ward, and I came to a bed, and there were 3 children in the bed. There was a baby in the middle who'd urinated across the bed. In fact, I think one of the other children had as well. There was a 2 or 3 year old, and then there was a kid at the other end of the bed who sat there, probably 8, 9 or 10, rocking. Do you know when kids rock
Right.
like that, backwards and forwards, staring into oblivion? Well, I slowly learned through the work we were doing in the UK that this is to imitate the rhythm of their mother's heart,
Right.
because that, that rhythm
Yeah.
brings some kind of peace. Yeah. But this kid is rocking backwards and forwards, and the bed is drenched. And so I stood next to this boy, and I stroked his shaven head. They'd shaved their heads so they didn't get lice.
Sure.
But there was no love, no care.
Yeah.
And I stroked him. And slowly as I stroked him, the rocking slowed.
Yeah.
Until it stopped. And he was at peace. And then Lois, who was the woman who'd taken me there, she said, "Steve, we've got to go." And we had to leave, and I left that ward, and I looked back through the broken door, and he began to rock slowly again,
Right.
slowly. And then she had to go and see somebody before we left, so she said, "You go back to the van, and I'll meet you there." And I went back to this Volkswagen, and I sat in the back of it, and I was so disturbed by what I've seen of these children with no love, no care, no hope, that I prayed. I was so broken by it, and I prayed that God would kill me, because I felt that I couldn't live anymore. Having seen this, I couldn't live anymore. I just couldn't go on. I said, I just come. And then I remember praying, and I don't know whether I said it or just thought it. I thought, because God, I can't go on, and you might as well kill me, because if everything I've learned at theological college about how you're in control of everything is true, then I hold you responsible for this.
Right.
I hold you responsible, and I'm not going to worship you, because actually in my brokenness, I'm a pretty broken person. I think I'm morally superior to you, because if you allow this, if you purposely make it happen, I'm just not interested in this. Like, forget it,
Yeah.
And that became a moment for me. I didn't die, clearly.
He didn't take you up on it.
No.
No.
And it became a moment for me, because for me, like I guess for you, Christianity isn't my hobby.
Yeah.
It's not what I do on a Sunday, or at weekends, or kind of like, for 5 minutes in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, my whole life, everything I do, my whole career, everything is wrapped up in this. And I reached this point through that, I thought, like, I can't live with ambiguities. I need to know. So I've got to deal with this. Like, why does this happen? And I know it's just a microcosm, even what I've seen, of the suffering and the pain and the brokenness that goes on in the world. And if God is the originator of this,
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to worship him.
Nothing to do with it.
No, I'm going to curse it.
Yeah.
And so I had to reevaluate. There's always reevaluations going on, and you're growing all your life, but I had to reevaluate all my theology, because I either had to dump Christianity or think it through.
Yeah.
And you've got to be authentic. You can't con yourself. You can't dump half the Bible. People do that all the time, don't they? They work off a very restricted canon, don't they? All the verses they like, and ignoring all the verses they don't like. They kind of cut and paste job.
Right.
And I realised I couldn't do that. So I had to work through, to use your term, a hermeneutic, where I was authentically comfortable with the meaning of the Bible, because I couldn't live with a lie anymore. And I think that terrible event began my spiritual migration, my journey
Yeah.
towards a more mature, I'm not saying I'm mature, a more mature faith, rather than an abandoning of this message that didn't make any sense. And I think I've been on that journey ever since. And what that has done through the years, now we work with endless thousands of children. So in the UK, we run 54 schools in poor communities, socio-economically deprived communities. They're the only ones we work in.
Yeah.
We've got nearly 33,000 children in our schools, and then their families and brothers and sisters. And then we work as well with children who have committed violent crime, and the courts can send them to us instead of a prison. And I've seen and know the impact of poverty and the developmental trauma that often creates. Because you live in poverty, poor housing, your mum or your dad, your primary caregiver, whoever that is, they don't have the time to give to you. They're doing 3 cleaning jobs. They're not there. This isn't a middle class family where they're sitting with their arm around you, reading to you each night. They haven't got time.
Right.
And they haven't got time because they're fighting to survive for food and rent.
Yeah.
And even if they have got physical time, they've not got the emotional space because they too have been let down and robbed and can't regulate, etc., etc. So, they're looking for love in all the wrong places because they've never been loved. And so the poverty and the cramped housing, etc., all creates family pressures and relationship pressures, and often partnerships and marriages crack under all of this. And then the child grows up through that, so the poverty is layers into developmental trauma, deep trauma, and we now know, since we could do MRI scans, that trauma changes not just the way that you think or the way that you behave. You're aggressive or you're sharp because you feel so much pain inside. I often say to people, all behaviour is communication of what's going on inside. Anger, is communication of internal anxiety and grief and struggle, etc., etc. We know all that, don't we? I should say my wife often says to me, just to make it, because otherwise you might think I'm talking about other people all the time.
Right.
My wife often says to me, Steve, the trouble with you, the more stressed you are, the more stupidly you behave.
Yeah, that lines up.
That's to you as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
The more stressed we are, the more stupid we are. We say stupid things, don't we, when we're stressed?
Yeah.
Like we regret.
Sure.
That because all behaviour is communication of what's going on inside. So these kids grow up in poverty, which is layered over with the developmental trauma, and that changes their behaviour. Changes, actually, we now know, because of neuroscience and because of the MRI scanner, the shape of their brain. And then what we do is we punish people for the bad start they get in life.
Yeah.
And we think that punishing somebody can help them be better.
Yeah.
And we putting them down even more can help them be better. If someone's got a broken leg, you don't say, look, I want to heal your broken leg, I'll kick it a few times.
Right.
But if someone...
Or demand that you walk on it.
Yeah.
Like a walk on it like a normal person.
Exactly.
Demand that from someone with a broken leg.
Act normally. Do what I would do.
Normal.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And yet we're locked into this thing where this kid's behaving badly, so we punish them until they behave well.
Right.
We demand that they behave this way. They can't. And so that pushes me right back into my theology. And I ask, what is sin? And the funny thing about sin is the traditional understanding of sin is when you do something wrong, it's because you're a really bad bloke.
Right.
When I make a mistake,
you're stressed.
It's because I'm stressed. It's because I'm having a hard day. It's because, I had that essay to hand in and I couldn't make it. It's because I've been working 12 hours. And don't you understand? I didn't sleep last night and I haven't eaten a square meal for a little bit. that's why I'm sorry I was sharp, but if you understood what was going on in my life, you'd understand it. But you, when you behave in exactly the same way as I've just behaved, it's because you're a sinner. And it's sin. And I think we need a huge reevaluation.
Come on. Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense. It's the blind man, the fellow that's born blind, and the disciples ask the question because they say, who sinned, his parents or him, that he was born blind? Looking for cause and effect. And Jesus, I think it's the Passion version, but Jesus literally says in that version, you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity here to step in to get involved. But it's not he wasn't looking at the cause and effect. He actually was there as a solution. I'm speaking, I'll tell this story because my wife, she came back and I want to ask what you're doing, but maybe this sets that up. She works at a ministry called Dream Center in Charlotte, this local for us, and a lot of after-school programs and meals and connecting with families in practical ways. But she also does this for kids that are struggling with reading, after-school program. And it's because it's a Christian organization, she has a lot of volunteers. And a young fella was there one day, and they're supposed to be helping each student go through their reading program. And but he's proselytizing, or he's trying to get the kid to say a prayer, And my wife keeps interrupting, saying, "That's great, but this is what I need you to do." And a little while later, she comes over to him, and he comes over to her, and he's all excited because he said the prayer. He said the prayer. And my wife came home, and she was so frustrated because she said he said the prayer 6 or 7 times. He doesn't know how to read. And it's a small microcosm of what you're talking about. Yeah. But we were having that conversation the other day about what justice actually looks like. Because you're talking about a practical justice that isn't focused on our theological constraints or constructs or what we need you to do so you can look more like us, or so you can participate in the way that we perceive the world and the way we perceive God. But it's actually, how do I speak to what's actually happening in you? Look beyond the behavior to the identity of the Christ that's within you, and the value that you actually are made in his image and likeness. But you're doing this practically. I mean, it's the kindness of God that actually changes anything.
I was talking to a young man, a child. So I called him a young man and a child because leading his child, not yet an adult, but he has he's with Oasis because he committed a very, very serious crime, violent crime. And I sat chatting with him just recently for a long while, and I asked him what his dreams were, what his hopes were, and he said he'd like to be a youth worker. And I said, why do you want to be a youth worker? Because of his situation, he won't be able to be for some time because he's in the criminal justice system. And he said, because I want to tell young men, kids, children, that there's a different way.
Yeah.
And he said, no one's ever shown me any of that. Right. I never knew. I never. And he said, I'm not excusing myself, but I never knew. But I want to help others not fall into these traps. And we talked on and on and on. And then at the end of this, as we came to the end of the conversation, he looked at me and he said, Steve, would you be my dad?
Wow. Yeah.
And I said, I can't be your physical dad because I'm not. But here's the thing, I'll walk with you. We'll walk together. You keep your end of the deal. You work at this every day, and I'll work at this with you, and I promise you, I will not let you down. And the truth is, as human beings, we are all made with a requirement to belong. We need to belong.
Yeah.
Our brains are adapted to it. Human beings are relational creatures. We are relational creatures.
Yeah.
We struggle to survive, let alone thrive, without love, being wrapped up around by love and care. And so isn't it incredible that Jesus says, well, look, like summing it all up, all of that Torah, all of that Old Testament, as we kind of rather arrogantly call it, it's the Jewish Bible. But summing it all up, says Jesus, it comes down to two big principles. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbour the way you love yourself. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
All summed up in that. And it's that love that cuts through everything.
Come on.
All of the time. I as I'm talking, I'm just reminded of a woman I met in Wales, actually.
Yeah.
And she was a prostitute. And I was sat in a cafe talking to her. And she said, she was telling me her story. She'd never been loved. She'd not been cared for. She was living off the street. She'd got into selling herself because she had nothing else to sell. And it was the only way of caring for herself. And then she got pregnant. She had a child. And in this conversation, I was explaining to her that she was made in God's image, that she was loved, that she was special, etc., etc. And she said, in the end of it, she said, well, do you think I could go to church? And I said, whether you go to church or not, it's not the deal.
Right. The
deal is you are loved by God, you are special. You've never felt that love from anyone, but you are loved, I can tell you. But she was fascinated. She said, well, do you think that means I could go to church then? I said, well, if you want to, you can. And then she said this thing. She said, there's a church just down the road. I could go to that. She said, but I wonder if they've got a side door. And I said, well, why do you wonder if they got a side door? And she said, well, I couldn't go in the front door, could I? I could only ever go in the side door. And I said, I think you can go in the front door.
Yeah.
Because you are loved by God every bit as much as I'm loved. But Jason, have enjoyed the fact that I had a mum that loved me.
Yeah.
And I had a dad that loved me.
Yeah.
And I got a family that loves me.
Yeah.
And I got people that appreciate me. But that girl never had.
Yeah.
You know, when Jesus, well, the Gospels talk about the term sinner all the time. They say Jesus hung around with the sinners.
Yeah.
The tax collectors and the sinners, and the scourge on Jesus that the Pharisees and the religious leaders put on him. He hangs around with sinners. I think we've misunderstood that term, because the term sinner in Jesus' culture simply meant excluded one.
Mm-hmm.
The shepherds were sinners because they were excluded. They stunk, and there was a bottom end of the range job. Prostitutes were excluded. Tax collectors were excluded. All sorts of people were excluded. They were called sinners because they were excluded from society.
Wow.
They were excluded. And Jesus was on the side of the sinners because they were excluded.
Yeah.
So that seems to me to be the task of the church, not to exclude people, but to include people, to include everyone.
Yeah.
That's our task.
Yeah.
That's the task of grace. I just should stop and let you ask questions.
No, this is good, bro.
I became responsible for a church. I became the pastor of a church in London, and very few people went to it. And so I did this in my spare time, and people started coming in, and the church happened to have some big front doors, and it still has, and a big patio outside, kind of outside. So you come up some steps, you stand on this patio, and people started coming to be part of the church. And then one Sunday we were going to celebrate communion, bread and wine, and I'd just been speaking, and then there was a song that people wanted to sing, and then we were going to take the bread and wine and celebrate communion, and and some people in the congregation who'd become part of the congregation, while the song was on, the band was singing a song, they went outside to the patio and had a fag. Had a fag break before the communion.
Sure.
So they go outside and have those fags and they stub them out as the song's finishing, and they come back in to take the bread and wine. And afterwards, one of the leaders of the church who'd been there before, it was a dying church, but now it's growing again, you know. One of the leaders of the church, she was lovely anyway, you know. She came up to me. She says, after the service, she said, "Did you see that, Steve?" I said, "See what?" She said, "The people that went out in the song and had a fag, a cigarette before communion." And I said, "Yeah, I did. And she said, "It's a disgrace."
Sure.
A disgrace.
Right.
And I said to her, actually, the disgrace is that we judge people. I said we, I didn't say that.
Sure.
We judge people
Yeah.
for having a fag
Yeah.
between the sermon and the communion. That is the disgrace.
Yeah.
But we are the church,
Come on.
and our job is to bring grace, not to disgrace people. And that attitude, if we have it, disgraces people. Our job is to show grace, which is open love that's boundless and never ceasing. Too many stories.
No, this is really good, man. There's all kinds of things pinging. I remember I led worship out of Bible college, and I knew this innately, even before I had the major shift. You know, for me, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, your neighbors, you love yourself, is only possible to the extent that we love because he first loved. Meaning, the more aware I am, you can only give away what you possess. And so the more aware I am of his affection and his kindness and his love, the more I can live in the abundance and the overflow. And I knew this because of my upbringing and the relationship I had with Jesus, even though often the pulpit was preaching that disgrace message. And I remember leading worship, and our bass player, he was high. And I knew he was high. And I thought, that's all right, we're going to have a good time anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, a couple people heard, and it caused major problems. And I didn't have enough wisdom. I was 25 at the time. I just knew that he was sincere, we were sincere, I was leading, and it's a beautiful thing that's happening. He, of course, after the service, he'd had a profound spiritual experience, which I think was enhanced. But it greatly marked him, and it marked him that there wasn't judgment on him as well.
Hey guys, so we have a conference coming up. It's our second annual family reunion in Charlotte, North Carolina, my backyard. And last year was so sweet. I'm really looking forward to this year, September 25 through 27. Baxter Kruger is going to be with us. So thankful for him. Damon Thompson is going to be with us. That's been a new friendship, and I'm incredibly grateful for him. It's going to be a time, guys. Dub Alexander will be with us again. Love Dub and all that he brings. Brooke Waters, whom you guys know and who helps put this conference on, she'll be with us. And Mark and Julie Appleyard, good friends of mine, dear friends of mine. They've been on the podcast. They're going to be with us, along with Michael and Bethany Wallace, who led worship last year. It was unbelievable, and it's going to be good this year. I'm really looking forward to this. September 25 through 27. You can learn more about it at afamilystory.org, afamilystory.org. We have the early bird tickets right now, so if you sign up now, it'd be the most cost effective. It also lets us know how to prepare for you. Guys, there will be fellowship, there will be worship, there will be deep end conversations and teaching around this Trinitarian faith, this beautiful gospel, this good news that only gets better, and the opportunity to connect again as a community. I'm so grateful for you all, so grateful for the ways in which We get to continue to discover and explore the goodness of God together. And I'm excited about the opportunity to do it face to face, September 25th through 27th. afamilystory.org. Come hang out with us. Oh, by the way, I'll be there too.
That's a great thing. Speaking of our church patio and the steps, I just said there's some steps that come up to it, and then this patio, and then come in through the doors. Well, I have a friend. His name's Matt, and he grew up in the church. He went to a charismatic, reformed charismatic church.
Okay.
And then he went to the Salvation Army.
Okay.
But he's gay.
Right.
And he was thrown out of both local churches.
Yeah.
And I eventually met him when he came into our church building. He snuck in the back one day, and he came again, and then I chatted to him and got to know him, etc., etc. And then he started coming with his boyfriend,
right?
This guy called Nathan, etc. And I'll tell you the end of the story in a minute, but it's two stories really. The first is, as I got to know him, Matt told me this. So he's pretty sophisticated, smart guy.
Right.
He said, I'd heard, Steve, that this church had grace for people who were gay. But he said, what you don't know is every single Sunday for 4 months. He said, 4 months. Every single Sunday for 4 months, I came and I stood at the bottom. There's about 10 steps up to this patio. And he said, I stood at the bottom of the steps and I heard you all singing, but I didn't have the courage to come up the steps because I couldn't trust that what I'd heard was true.
Right.
And I couldn't trust that I'd be accepted instead of rejected again and prayed against and told I was broken and a sinner and unredeemable and sentenced to hell. And he said, but one Sunday I came halfway up and I saw you, but I couldn't make it all the way up. And the next Sunday I made it to the top and I looked in, but I still didn't trust it. But the Sunday you saw me in the back was the first Sunday that I made it into the building. Well, some months went by, in fact a long time went by. I shouldn't say some months, probably a couple of years.
Right.
And Matt and Nathan became really much part of the church, and they'd throw themselves into everything. They'd serve others, and their sense of spirituality was extraordinary. And then one day, one week, they said, would I go out and have a drink with them? So I went along to this bar, and the three of us sat there.
Right.
And I normally get everything wrong in life, but this was a glorious moment of coming to. So they sit there, and it's obvious they're really nervous. And they said to me in the end, they said, look, Steve, the thing is, we know we can't get married in the church, but we're going to get a civil partnership. We're going to do a legal thing at the registry office. And we know that we can't get married in the church. But after we've done our civil partnership, would you allow us to come to the church building because this is our home?
Sure.
And would you say a little private prayer for us? And that's actually what Matt said. He said, would you say a little private prayer for us? And because for once in my life I thought the right thing to say at the right moment, because you normally think of the right thing to say about half an hour afterwards.
Yeah.
So he said, would you say a little private prayer for us? And I looked at them both, because they were the other side of this table as we sat. I looked at them both and I paused. And then I said, no. They looked shocked. And I said, I will not say a little private prayer for you after your civil partnership. We are going to throw the biggest celebration you've seen in your lives, and everyone's going to come, and we're going to do this publicly. we are going to celebrate that we love you and we are committed to you. Yeah. Anyway, we did. We did. Wow. And I also said to them, by the way, in lots of countries around the world, even if you get married, you go to the registry office first and you do the legal bit. That's not really a marriage. That's just to do with tax and all that kind of. Yeah. So the marriage has always been the coming together of two families and a community to celebrate you and stand with you. Right. That's it. So I said, even though the law says you can't be married yet, that's only because the law doesn't understand marriage. So let's all go down the registry office and do that little legal bit about, tax and wills and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to do what's always been a biblical marriage. We're going to do this together in this place. And that day we celebrated the marriage of Matt and Nathan. And I tell you this, I'll cry when I'm saying it. I tell you this, the church was jam-packed, and it was lots of people have told me this, it was one of the most spiritual, the deepest spiritual encounters that I had had, or anybody there had, as we celebrated this love and Matt and Nathan's commitment to one another, that didn't just want to live together. They wanted to say, we honour you, God, and we want to live our lives for you, and we need the support of this community and this church, and we celebrated it together. Wow. I don't know why I even got around to telling you, but that was another grace thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that burns when you're sharing is it comes back to a belonging.
Yes.
That we were created for it.
Yeah.
And that to me, what you're talking about is as powerful because it is. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say Genesis chapter 1. I often say to people, say the Bible only consisted of one chapter, and you dispensed with the rest.
Right.
Genesis chapter 1 is enough.
Yeah.
Because Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 says this, and for those that who know these things, you can look into it. Genesis chapter 1 is a kind of satirical take on the Babylonian creation myth. So there was the Babylonians were the superpower of the day, and they had written and verbalized their creation story, which is called Enuma Elish. And actually, you can go look it up. You know, look on Google. If anybody doesn't believe this, just go Google.
Yeah.
Babylonian creation story, Babylonian creation myth, anything to do. Because there's endless copies of this that we dug up from around the world. Iraq, Babylon, etc., etc. We have all these documents, and in this story, what happens is that Marduk, who is the god of the Babylonians, fights with his mother. This great kind of battle between themselves, because he hates his mother. He's already killed his father, and he hates his mother.
Okay.
And he slays her.
Uh-huh.
And truly, you can check this out.
I'm following.
Within minutes. Kind of like he slaughters her, and he cuts her open, and he splays her out.
Yeah.
And that, says the Babylonian creation myth, is what you see when you look up at the heavens. Is the splayed out internal organs of his mother.
Okay.
And Marduk then, by accident, by killing his mother, murdering his mother, has created the universe, and then creates people to look after the universe.
Okay.
But creates one person who is his representative on earth, made in his image. The king of Babylon.
Okay.
Genesis chapter 1 is set out in exactly the same form and language as the Babylonian creation story, except it subverts it all. God creates the heavens and the earth and the universe out of goodness and says it is good, not it is a mistake that I made when I was in Babel, not that it's bad, it's good. Everything is good.
Come on. And
then comes verse 27, which is enough to give your life to. Because in verse 27, it says this, and then God created humanity.
Yeah.
Male and female.
Yeah.
He created them. Let us create them in our image.
Yeah.
Male and female, he created them, all humanity in our image, the image of God. So in verse 27 of the Bible, on the first page, you haven't even got to turn it over, you've got this extraordinary thing. It's not just the king.
Right.
It's not hierarchical. It's not just for males. Everyone, every human being is created in God's image and is God's representative. Indelibly,
Come on.
they bear God's spirit. They are God's representatives. Because of archaeology, we've now dug up. You can go to any. You can Google this again. Because I say that because I want people to know, or you to know. I'm not making this up.
Right.
This isn't Steve Chalke spin. So we've dug up statues of Babylonian kings, etc. And because the kings installed these statues in each town, and you get the statue of the king, and round the bottom it says the image of Marduk, the image of God. The king was the image of God. But what Genesis chapter 1 says, you're in God's image. I'm in God's image. Everyone in God's image. You're in God's image, whether you're straight or gay or trans or black or white, or we are all made in God's image.
Yeah.
That's the truth of Genesis chapter 1. And then after this has happened, of course, there's this great statement. And God saw all that he had made. All.
Yeah.
And it was very
Yeah.
good. Original goodness.
Yes.
Not original sin.
Yes.
Original goodness.
That's right. That's
We're
right.
all made in God's image.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, I know that people get them, so they say, what about Romans chapter 1, and what about 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and 1 Timothy chapter 1, and what about, and there's probably too much for us to talk about here because we've been going on for a long time already, but do the hermeneutical work.
Yeah.
Study these passages and discover what they were really saying, because a text without context, as you know as well as I, is always a pretext for whatever you want to believe.
To whatever you want to defend.
And we have, so isn't it wonderful, really, that people like us are always right and everybody who's not like us is always wrong? Isn't it an extraordinary thing that we always turn out
We
to be
seem to
good
know
guys?
what God's like.
Yeah.
Just us.
Yeah. So do the work, the hermeneutical work. I always say to people, study the context, understand what was going on in Rome and what Paul's really writing about in Romans chapter 1. Understand what Paul's saying in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, or these clubber passages as they get called, that people think you can club gay people with. Understand them, do the work. Do the work. Right back to where we started. You've got to do the work on the Bible. You can't just read it.
Yeah.
You have to study it, because a text without a context is a pretext, and it becomes a pretext for disgracing people who are made in God's image.
Come on. You got on to preach, man.
I'm sorry, I feel so passionate about all this stuff. I'm too old not to be passionate about it.
I want to say that the thing that I love is, you're profoundly studied and very, very wise, and also quite intelligent. Quite intelligent.
No, I'm not really. Trust me, I'm not. I just care about this.
But that's what I love about these conversations, and I love that I'm honored to connect with you, is that everything that is coming from you is from that place of He's good. He loves us. He's good. He can be trusted. It is, you're not speaking, you're not giving us knowledge, some sort of, yes, do the work. But for me, and these guys know me, the reason I say I'm a relational theologian is because I suck as an academic theologian. Listen. I ran the sound department for my Bible college, so I understand how to run sound. My wife was a senior, I was a freshman. We both took the sound class together because it was the only thing we could take. I was overseeing all the students as they took they ran the soundboard. We took tests at the end. I got a C-, she got an A+. It tells you a little bit about me and the system. But the thing that burns in me is when I had the major shift 15, 16 years ago, there were two major things that happened. One was Jesus is what God is like. Mm. And so for me, I actually stopped reading all the scriptures for a period of time, just read the Gospels, because I had so often seen the, Zahn calls the monster God, or the controlling God, that I wanted nothing to do with. That one that if you're in control and you're doing this, I want nothing to do with you. And so I don't get a say in what God's like. Jesus is what he's like. And so I reset my lens. But the other thing that what was major shift for me is I also don't get a say in how he sees me. And when I began to see myself in Christ, or how my Father saw me, as I began to realize that he is good and only good, that he said it is very good, that the next thing I realized was original sin didn't originate in the mind of man. It was always an outside job, that he created us in his image and likeness, and that every one of us was created, loved, perfect. And when you get that, the expansiveness of grace, or the expansiveness of this gospel, to be able to walk into any place and realize, and I think we started off before I hit record, that I'm convinced that if you're growing in your relationship or your awareness or your friendship with God, you're growing ever more expansive in how you think, as far as you're growing ever more inclusive. That the thoughts you had yesterday are challenged by his goodness today. And you can't walk into a room and not be, if you're going to be offended by how inclusive he is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes huge sense. And it raises another question, I don't know if we've got time to
go for it,
deal with it, but people will say, well, if all this is true, Jason, what about God's anger? What about everything I read of God's wrath? I'd say two things about that, because again, you've got to do the work. You can't dismiss verses that you don't feel like dealing with.
And you've spent a good deal of time on those, by the way. You could speak, but carry on. I know you've written on it.
Karl Barth, I'm sure you know that name. They always say Karl Barth was the greatest theologian of the 20th century. He wrote this book, his great thesis, more than 6 million words, Church Dogmatics.
Okay.
And but Barth, if you understand his thought, which took me years to get my head around, but it's beautiful and it's simple, really. But one of the things that Karl Barth says is this. He said, anytime you hear about an attribute of God, God's justice or God's anger or God's wrath or whatever it be, he said, you have to understand that all of these things are just a different way of saying God is love. Because God is love. It's not an attribute he has. God is love. It's who he is. So to understand God's anger or God's judgment, for instance, outside of God's love, is always to misunderstand it and to miss it completely. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say, so much about this, is years and years and years ago, I got to know an extraordinary academic in Britain who was also the most senior rabbi in the country, Jonathan Sacks, Dr. Jonathan Sacks. He died in the pandemic. But he was nationally known, not just as a religious leader, but as a nationally loved figure in Britain, Jonathan Sacks. Look up his name. And it so happens that some years before he died, I had the chance to speak at the same event as him. And we were both sat at the back of a stage. He was going to speak, which is a good thing. I was going to speak. I don't know why they invited me to speak. But there were loads of young people taking part, and there was some dance and some drama and all sorts of things going on. And then we would go and speak. So we sat at the back, and between one dance group's gone on, another gone off, and another comes on. I thought, it's not often I get to speak to the senior rabbi in Britain.
Right.
His title's actually Chief Rabbi.
Right.
Britain's Chief Rabbi. And we met a couple of times, but never really talked at depth. So I said to Dr. Sachs, while I got the chance, because I don't often sit next to you, I said, I know the Jewish Bible, Old Testament, as we call it, I'm sorry, I said that I know that the Jewish Bible talks about God's anger or God's wrath. The Hebrew words can be translated as either anger or wrath. It talks about God's anger a lot. And I said a lot of Christians pick up on that. They have an angry God theory who needs to get the blood of his son to relieve his anger because he can't control himself. I said, I just wondered, I wanted to ask you, the passages in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, about God's anger, how do you understand them? And Jonathan Sachs smiled at me and he said, Steve, that's a good question. He said, if you don't mind me saying, it is kind of frustrating that you Christians have got hold of our Bible when you don't think and dream in Hebrew and don't understand it, and then you keep telling us what it means.
Right. Yeah.
He said, so I'm glad.
That's us again telling people what it means. Yes.
So he said, so I'm glad you've asked me what it means. And then he said this. He said, I think you'll find, he was so kind. He said, I think you'll find, if you look at the words, the Hebrew words, there are a few of them that are translated God's anger. It's perhaps better to translate them God's anguish.
Mm.
And that sentence changed my life.
Yeah.
Because I'm a dad. So
Yeah.
I've got 4 kids.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
And my kids are grown now. I've got 10 grandchildren now.
Yes.
So I have anguish for them when they do stupid things, like risky things. I have anguish for them, but I never have burning rage or anger for them that says, you've offended me, so I'm going to lock you in the shed and burn you forever at the end of your life. So this is so not it's totally out of tune with what Jesus teaches about God, the loving Father, the God of love, isn't it? And yet, when you understand that God is a God of love, you understand the anguish that a God of love will feel when he sees us wrecking ourselves.
Come on.
The anguish. So that's what I'd say about God's anger.
Yeah.
It's anguish for us. It's an emotional response of the God who is love to our stupidity, to our obstinance.
Yeah, of the Father.
Yes. But like you'll know, because you're a dad, aren't you?
That's right.
Yeah, you've got 3 children.
That's right.
Right. However frustrating your children are, and they must have been frustrating at some times.
Sure.
A father or a mother always longs and hopes for the best and never gives up.
Yeah. That's the simplicity of the God. That's that relational aspect of theology to me that it so resonates, because all you have to do is be a dad for a hot minute, and you realize there's no way that I'm participating in some sort of view of justice that is punitive, that would somehow separate myself from yours. When they handed me my daughter, the first time they put her in my arms, everything in me said, everything I have is yours. All that I am is yours. And then at the last second, I didn't say, but if you screw up, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's none of that there. It was just everything I have is yours.
I love you, but if you upset me, you have no idea what I'm going to do to you
It's
for
so
eternity.
it's laughable. It's laughable.
It's laughable, and it's horrendous that we say that to
Yes.
people in God's name.
It's horrendous. It is horrendous, and it's a beautiful conversation to be having, because I know there's folks probably watching who are stretched. We live in such a dualistic world. We live in the context of separation. We live where it's almost impossible to hear that one area that we haven't had our heart expanded in yet, that we don't get triggered. And suddenly we're running into our corner, as opposed to, and this, again, I can see you have something, but that piece where Jesus said, you're asking the wrong question, for me was huge, because he was saying, you're trying to play a measurement game, and and my love is a measureless revelation. And so you're playing the wrong game every time you want to participate in the conversation where you're counting sin instead of your awakening to the measureless nature of my love.
Yeah. And all I was going to say is, over the years, I've heard people, and perhaps I was like this myself, because we're constantly growing in our faith, and moving on and developing. But people say, well, if all this is true, then, Steve, they say this to me often, if all this is true, Steve, if God loves everybody, people say, what's the point in going to church then? Have you ever heard it?
Or what's the point in being good?
Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point in mission? And what's the point in this? What's the point? You tell me I've wasted all my life going to church when God loves everybody. And because that gives away the shallowness of everything.
Yeah.
The point of following Christ is because it's the best way to live.
Yeah.
God's love works for everyone.
Yeah.
You love your daughter, however much she screws up or doesn't screw up.
Right.
But you want her to live well, not scrape through life. Your love's not affected for her if she scrapes through life. Yeah. But you want her to live well.
Yes.
And the point of living Jesus' way is because it's the best way of being alive.
100%. Yes, I have stories. We can keep going, but my heart resonates. We got kicked out of a church 6 years ago because I had written on the topic of hell, and I was just expansive. As you said, we're growing. I mean, the early church, for the first 10 years, only Jewish people were allowed in. And then there's a moment. Surely God shows no partiality. This is maturity in leadership, where we are constantly getting expanded and realizing the gospel is way more inclusive than we thought. But I'm sitting with the elder, and I know that this conversation is critical to what's going to happen next. And he says the same way. He said, if hell doesn't exist, what keeps me from cheating on my wife and doing drugs? And he was using a very pastoral tone with me. Yeah. So I got real pastoral with him. And I said, brother, are you telling me that you want to cheat on your wife and do drugs? He immediately, because he was playing that game, jumped back. And I said the same thing. I said, because living aware of his affection, living aware of his love is the best way to live. It is the thing that restrains you. It is the evidence, self-control, the evidence of his indwelling. It's a better way. It's what you're talking about. It's what you want for your kids. Yeah. It's also the thing that is going to transform the world. You're talking about maybe round third here, which is an American baseball statement, but with the understanding that oh shoot, I lost it. The fact that practically that's what it was. You started this off with some powerful stories about actually walking into places where only love is going to transform. Only love transforms anyway. Only kindness transforms anyway. But instead of living a survivalist life where you're trying not to sin and you're going to church on Sundays, as we awaken to this stunning, breathless, measureless love of God, you can't help but become a lover of people. And then you can't help but become a catalyst for transformation. for the kindness of God, to actually practically live in such a way where you're walking into places and seeing change.
What I find is in all my work with the families we work with, I should say, around the UK, in other countries, India, African countries, etc., around the world, with tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of families every day. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So I find that loved people love people.
Come on.
But if people are not loved, they find it very difficult to love. And that reminds me of Karl Barth, who I've mentioned. He died in 1974, I think. But it was a couple of years before he died, and he was doing a seminar for Christianity Today, which is a big magazine in the US, isn't it? And the editor had asked him to do this thing, and he was doing it with some students as well. And the editor of Christianity magazine asked him a question, and he said, Dr. Barth, what's your deepest theological insight? And Karl Barth said, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. We are weak, but he is strong. That's a great theological insight.
Yes, Jesus loves me. That is it. Come on, man. That's it. I love it. I love it. I love it's such a privilege and an honor to talk with you and to do it in person.
Yeah.
And I love, I've said this last time, but storytelling is everything to me, and you're a master at it. And so that's all.
Well, it's the only way I can remember anything.
Yeah.
Those stories.
Well, it helps all of us too. But it's rethinking God with tacos. Have you had tacos while you've been stateside?
Yes, I have.
Have you?
Yeah.
Did you
Earlier
today?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, a kind of taco thing. Yeah.
What was it? What'd you have?
Oh, it was filled with vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. They didn't call it taco, but it was kind of approaching one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are you a vegetarian?
No, I'm not vegetarian, but I actually, my kids constantly urge me to be vegetarian. I'm a lot more vegetarian than I used to be. One of my sons is vegan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, we spent a lot of time with him, so I eat vegan.
Okay. Yeah.
And as I get older, my wife tells me eat healthy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's, my wife does that too. Yeah. I'm going to live a long time because of her. Well, that's in the title, so I had to ask. Rethinking God with Tacos. Is there any way that folks could learn more about you? Where would they go?
To learn more about Oasis, the work that I do, the website is just Oasis. The best one to start with, Oasis is in lots of countries, but if they start with oasisuk.org.
Yeah.
oasisuk.org, and that will introduce you to things that Oasis does in all sorts of places and other websites, and ways in which that, in fact, we've got a brand new website which is called Academy for Hope, academyforhope.org, and that's a whole course that we put together on how to work on some projects in your community, to develop local projects of all sorts, that are sustainable, that are ways of working out this gospel good news of love.
Come on. I love it. Honored. Hey, can you pass on my hello to Bono?
I'll drop him a line.
Just let him know Jason says hi.
Yeah.
I love you, man. Thankful.
Cheers. God bless you.
That's good.